going to be a little bit different from a conventional presentation, so I hope you'll be able to participate and be part of it all, because that's what I'm talking about. Learning nowadays isn't just about me talking to you, at you. It's about collaborative, social activities. I'm going to start with a bit of presentation first, and then we'll get some collaboration going. Thank you for the introduction. I don't know what you said, so I'm going to introduce myself again. I'm sure you've said it, but thank you. Most people know me online through my work at the Center for Learning and Performance Technologies. I think you said so. And that's where I share everything I find out about what's happening in the learning world. I tap into what's happening in both education and workplace learning. Primarily, my role now is working with organizations. But I came from an education background. I was a lecturer for 14 years in a university in London. So I do know what it is to be working in a university as well. So I don't forget that part of my life. But as I say, I specialize now in workplace learning, really. And I've written a few books recently about how learning is changing and what it means for the modern workplace. But as I say, I'm also very cognizant of what it means for education as well. And that's what I'm going to try and talk to you about today. I've got my little remote here. I'm hoping it's going to work okay. So what I was going to start with was talking about how we as individuals are learning for ourselves and how that's changed over the last few years. And then talk about what that means for education and how I'm seeing many universities and colleges and even schools changing, adapting, modernizing their approaches to take on board all the new ideas and the new ways people are learning for themselves. And that's the part, when I get to that part, that's the part I'd like to ask you to participate in. Now, the reason why I feel I can talk to you about this is because for the last 9 years, I've been running a survey about the tools that people like to use for learning. And I've asked learning professionals from all around the world to contribute their top 10 tools for learning. And from that, I've created the top 100 tools for learning. And as I say, it's now in its 9th year. This year will be its 10th year. So over the 10 years, I've built a longitudinal study of the way people are changing their thinking, the tools they're using, their new approaches. And the good thing about it is when people name their 10 tools, they often say how they're using them, what the difference it's making in their classrooms or for themselves. So I don't know how many of you have seen this last year's tool set, the top 100 tools for 2015. It's available as a presentation on SlideShare. If you're familiar with SlideShare, you can go to the website and have a look through it. And it's become very popular now. It's getting, one year, I think 2012, there are over 1 million views of this SlideShare. So people using it to stimulate ideas for themselves in their own learning, in their classrooms, and in workplace as well. I did put a definition there of how I termed a learning tool. It's one that, probably a piece of software, an online tool or a service that can be used for your own personal learning or for teaching or training. So it's quite a wide definition, if you like, of what a learning tool is all about. I haven't got time to take you through all 100, but it's a good exercise to actually work through them yourself and have a quick look, see if there's anything you are not familiar with. I'm going to show you the top 10. So for those of you who haven't seen it, you might be a little bit, before I do that, I should just tell you a bit about the voter demographics. As I said, 63 countries contributed, so it's not European, it's not American, it's global. And I also keep a track of the people that are using it. And you can see the top part, 20, nearly 30%, nearly a third probably, because it includes instructional designers and developers, and only a third probably come from, perhaps nearly a half even come from education and a half from workplace. So it's very much a balance of people in being involved in it. So it's not skewed one way or the other. So we get different views from different people on what they're using and what they like to use. So let me have a look now at these top 10. And we'll start with 10 to 15. 10 to 6. And you notice on there we have Evernote, which is a personal note-taking tool. Skype, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. WordPress, the tool you can use for blogging or to create websites. Then we have Facebook. And then we have Dropbox, which is the tool for sharing files. And you're probably thinking by now, if you haven't seen this list before, where are these educational tools? So let's go on to the next 5. At number 5, we have PowerPoint. Aha, something we recognize. PowerPoint's on the list. At number 4, we have Google Docs, collaborative documentation tool. And number 3, we have Google. Well, I think most people think that is the learning tool. You go on and you Google away. Most of you probably do that. If you want to learn something, you just Google it, don't you? This is your number 1 e-learning tool, probably. But actually, it's not at number 1, is it? It's number 3 this year. It's been up and down a little bit, but it's never actually been number 1. What about number 2? Any guesses what that's going to be? Well, number 2 is YouTube. And I guess sometimes you don't even Google it, do you? You just go straight to YouTube to find what you want. The little video that will show you how to do something or give you a quick insight into some aspect. That's number 2. So what is number 1? Well, for the 8th year running, you know this, those are people who know it, it's Twitter. And usually when I show this, you know, people are astounded. They say, what's Twitter got to do with learning? And I say, well, it might not have a lot to do with education, although it is being used in education. It might not have a lot to do with training, although some organizations do use it, but it has everything to do with learning. And for me, I think Twitter sort of summarizes the whole way that learning is changing. If learning for an individual is now about using Twitter, things are changing dramatically. I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. But these are just the 10 tools. Where are the educational tools? They are on there, down the list a bit. There's different things. Moodle is on the list. It's a little bit under 10, but it's there. That's actually probably the top-rated sort of course management tool. There are a few others. They're authoring tools. But primarily, the tools on the list are free, online, social tools. They're tools people are using for their own personal learning, primarily, and then adapting them and using them in education or the workplace, or adapting and using the principles behind them for the workplace. So the way they're learning now is moving into the classroom and into their teaching and training. So let's just recap on some of those things. Twitter was number 1. And I think for many people now, professional social networking is an important aspect of learning for them in today's world. So that's the things like Twitter and Facebook even, and LinkedIn. Which ones they choose will depend on the focus that they want. Perhaps, you know, Facebook for more colleagues and close friends, that kind of approach to learning, or professional learning might be LinkedIn, where they connect with people in groups and so forth. But Twitter, again, number 1 you see is one of the key ways people are learning, and that short interactions with people where they share resources, share ideas, share quick things, all kinds of different things. And for me, it is my number 1 tool. The first thing I look at in the morning when I wake up before email is my Twitter feed. I don't look through it to see everything that's happened since I went to bed, but for some key things perhaps that people have contacted me, asked me for help. But Twitter brings you a continuous flow of short pieces of information, short interactions with people. It's just a drip feed of learning. And I say I probably couldn't be standing here talking to you today if it wasn't for Twitter. Because my knowledge about the world has come from that just constant stream of information, from what my colleagues are doing in the wider world, what people are thinking, the resources they're sharing. And I just sort of tap into things all day long. That's the way I work. Some people prefer to do it on a more regular basis, but I just like to tap into it on a continuous process. One of my colleagues actually went as far as to say that he's learned more in his professional life in the last 6.5 years of using Twitter than he did in the last 30 years. Gives him access to smart people, enormous wealth of information and insight to their commentary and links to research, articles, and other resources. How many of you use Twitter? Okay, what Twitter account? How many use it every week? How many people use it every day? Yeah, they say you're not using Twitter unless you use it every day. And that's the point of it. It's got to be that continuous stream. You know, if you just tap in and out, you know, that's okay, but it's not really using Twitter. You're good. And when you do, you start to build up the value. So those of you who haven't tried it yet, you need to tap in, find the right people to follow, not Beyonce or people talking about what they've had for lunch. It's the people who are going to bring you value, because it's your network. You choose. So social networking is really become very important, and we can't forget that. The other way that people are keeping up to date is through other types of knowledge flows, other continuous streams, through, you know, blogs and other feeds, YouTube feeds, and all other kinds of things. And again, for me, blogging, listening to what my colleagues are writing about is important. I keep in contact with what they're thinking through reading blogs and posts. So it's not just Twitter, it's more longer, lengthier pieces of content. But again, I decide what I'm going to read, who I'm going to read, when I'm going to read it, how long I'm going to spend on it. I make those decisions for myself about that. And if I'm here like today, I probably won't be able to do it. So I'll just, you know, delete the stuff that's come in today because I haven't had time. If there's anything good in your network, it'll come back to you. So don't be worried about just pressing that delete button if you're getting too much. But of course, when we think about self-improvement and development in a more educational sense, we know that there are now so many MOOCs. I know you mentioned MOOCs. I heard that word. Many MOOCs out there where you can tap in, Coursera, Udemy, edX, and so forth. And the good thing about MOOCs, of course, is you don't have to sit there and work through it from beginning to end. You can just dip in and out, and that's how most people are using them, or a lot of people are using them nowadays. Some people want to sit there and work in a very structured, organized way, but others just want to dip in and out. And I think if you run your own MOOCs, you just be conscious that there are people come in for different reasons, especially if you make them open, really open to the outside world, excuse me, then you will need to ensure that people can come in and get things when they want them. They haven't got to sit there and do it in a very prescribed way, because that's not how they're working on the outside world. They just want to get the stuff when they want it, as they need it, and move on. And of course, it's not just through conventional training and educational systems that they're doing that. They're getting access to YouTube and Google, as we've said earlier, and SlideShare. This is, again, providing them with up-to-date information now. If you need something quick and easy, a YouTube video or a SlideShare presentation or whatever it might be. So we're seeing people move away from more conventional types of approaches to these more informational types of approaches to learning. And in fact, this year, as you saw, YouTube was number 2 on the list, and it really has become quite strong in position on that top 100 tool list. In fact, probably I'd say 2015 was really the year video took off. Even for people like myself, and maybe some of you who are much more text-based, you like reading things, video, now you realize the power of video to just really see something and grasp it. So video is something that we can't overlook when we're thinking about what it means for teaching and learning. And also, you notice there are a lot of collaboration tools on that list. And the interesting thing, both in education and in training, is that groups are now organizing themselves to work and learn together. This is not necessarily something they've been told to do or asked to do. Students, as you're probably aware, build their own Facebook groups and so forth, and share documents in many different ways. So for me, this is where the real social learning lies, where people come together for a purpose, to learn and to work together, to achieve something, whether it's in the workplace, to the jobs, or if it's in education, to perhaps work on a project together or to support one another. So the groups are really, collaboration tools are really, as you can see from that list, really becoming very important part of learning today. Learning can be an individual, personal pursuit, or it can be a collaborative pursuit with others. And finally then, one thing that came out of the list was that in last year, the use of iPad was very popular. A couple of years ago, it was the iPhone that was, the #1 tool. Now it's the iPad. I can see a few iPads around. And the thing is, iPad is so flexible, personal tool, educational tool, corporate tool, classroom tool. It's just used in so many different ways for quick and easy access to educational and informational and instructional resources. So the question is, what can we glean from this? The way people are learning. What are the key features that are coming out of the way people are learning on the web? And I think there are a number of things that we can take away from this, which, but there are more. I'm just going to home in on a few here. The first one, I think, is that we're seeing much more shorter interactions. Remember, short interactions on Twitter, short video, things are becoming much more smaller, much bite-sized, which is something that we have to be aware of, that people's attention spans are dropping. And they want short things. They're looking for short things, something that keeps them attention, and then they're moving on to something else. It's also highly visual now, video. Again, very important, not so much text-based now. People tend to go for videos and animations rather than text. And mobile, of course, iPads, iPhones, anything on the go, anywhere learning, whatever learning means, whether it's educational, informational, whatever it is, mobile, on the go, it takes place anywhere you like. And, of course, very social. It can be an individual pursuit, as I said, or it can be a highly social one, where people collaborate and work together. It's not all social, it doesn't have to be all social, but we can learn from things other people share in an individual way. So social can mean learning with other people or learning from other people, from the things other people have shared. And as we know, the whole web is full of user-generated content, stuff that people have freely and willingly shared. Of course, that's the implications for that is we need to do our own quality assurance. Nobody's going to do that for us. We have to decide, using our common sense and our new skills on the web, for finding the good stuff and valuing the good stuff. So, and finally, I think this is really, for me, the big one. Learning is very much an autonomous process on the web. As I said earlier, I choose what I find. I spend as much time on it as I want, and so forth. No one's telling me what to do. I do it. And all of you who are out there looking at stuff, you make those decisions for yourselves. And so these more self-directed, self-managed approach is what people are used to. They don't see it like that. They don't see it in those educational terms that we use, self-directed, self-managed. They just see it as something they do for themselves. So the question is, what does this mean for education? And that's what I'd like to spend a little bit of time on now and get you to participate as well. I think you've picked up straight away from probably mine and everybody else's presentations that learning on the web is very different from learning in a conventional classroom. And here I am doing the same old stuff, talking at you, whereas you could be looking it all up on the web if you really wanted to. The problem is, what has happened in the past is that people have just thought we need to take that experience and put it online. Just replicate. But unfortunately, that hasn't worked very well. We've turned those great big lengthy classroom sessions into great big lengthy courses. And as we've seen, people are not that happy with that. They've become a little bit frustrated, shall we say, at that click next approach to e-learning, which is slide after slide after slide. So my word of wisdom to you is, as I'm sure you probably said, that digitizing education is not just about moving that into that. It's about rethinking the whole approach to way we do both of those things, the classroom and online. So what I'm seeing, and we're going to talk a bit about this, how education is adapting to this new world of learning. And so what it's doing is exactly as I was just mentioning. It's modernizing both the classroom approach and the online approach. The classroom's a very important part of learning in an institution like this. So what we not to do is just get rid of it, but we need to think about how to modernize that approach and make it more valuable and for the people in the classroom. So what I'm seeing is that universities and schools, in fact, and colleges are moving from the lecture hall approach, which we've got here really, to the more collaborative classroom, where they're using a flipped approach, which I think I saw on that, the words I saw on the screen. They're flipped learning. They're using a flipped approach, which is where they're taking all the stuff like I've just done to you, the talking at you stuff, out of this session and putting it online, so that the session we have together becomes much more collaborative and participative. It could be a session together with everybody, or it could be much more group-based. And it's probably going to revolve around discussions and brainstorming activities and making sense of the content in terms of activities and really possibly one-to-one situations as well as group situations. So in an ideal world, I would have done what I've just done now earlier. You'd have looked at it online in some form or other. And we'll look about what that might be in a minute, so that when we come here, we can start to have a discussion about it. So I'm not just broadcasting to you. So, and then, of course, this is where the technology can come in as well. So not just about coming together and working together with paper and pencils and whatever. That's fair enough, but we can really use the technology to do that through whatever it be, smartphones or laptops or tablets. And I don't know what your policy is here, but I'm seeing now people say, well, instead of saying no phones in the classroom, they're saying bring your phones in. Are you doing that? Bring your phones in, use your phones, because this is a part of everyday life. I don't know about you, but if I was asked to turn my phone off for an hour, I don't know what I'd do. You probably saw me over there tweeting and doing things. It's just who we are. We've got to accept that. So we bring them in, we make a virtue of it, and say, let's do some stuff together. So that's what we're going to do, some stuff together. So if you've got your iPhones or your tablets or whatever, get them out, because we're going to start using them now. And I'm going to show you a few things how we can do that together. If you haven't got one, You just have to but maybe look over the shoulder of somebody else or whatever. So what I'm seeing is people are using these devices more in the classroom to do things. And one of the really, really simple things that they're doing is the use of QR codes. I don't know if you've used these. You've probably seen them around the place, these funny little squares. Into that is embedded some information. In this case, a website. So if you've got one, get your phone out and have a look. If you have got a smartphone, you need to get a QR reader first. So if you go to if it's Google, you go to Google Play. If it's iPhone, you go to the App Store, and you get your QR reader. And then basically, once you've got the QR reader, you just hold it up to the QR code, and you just read it. And it'll take you to wherever and whatever that's embedded. So I see a few phones going up. I'm hoping that I put the right one in, and it should take you to a place called qrstuff.com. Yep. Now, the reason we do that is because it means we don't have to type in those long URLs. Fortunately, that's a short one, qrstuff.com, but sometimes URLs can be really long. And if you want people to use websites or access resources in the classroom, and you don't have to make them type it all in. QR codes are just a dream that you can print them out on paper or whatever you like to do with them. Put them up on the screen, and people just can straight away look at them. Now, if you look to qrstuff.com, you see that the type of things you can turn into a QR code are websites or a YouTube video or a Twitter feed or either Dropbox access, a Skype call, email address, all kinds of things. It doesn't just have to be a website. So you can embed your email address in it, your business card, all kinds of things. And therefore make it very easy for someone to access it. So if you ask people to bring their phones in, and as I say, most of them probably got their phones anyway, it doesn't matter what the device is they've got, whether it's an iPhone or an Android or whatever, they can access the QR code. And that way you can really get them interacting with content much more quickly than having to type it in and going around and checking they've typed it in all correctly. So if you haven't, or if you want to have a quick go, why don't you try and create you can actually generate a code yourself through this type. You just put the website in or choose whatever you want here, and it'll create a code for you, and then you just download it, and that's it. And you've got one. And then you either stick it into your Word file or you stick it onto your PowerPoint presentation, and it's there. Anybody wants to have a try of it, because we'll be a way to share it in a minute, you can do that. So the question is, so try creating one. And it's quite a useful little exercise if you're going to get people doing this, to get them to create their own things in the first place. Perhaps their email addresses, maybe a good icebreaker to get people started with phones. So let's get them started and share things. So the question is, I guess, how could you use those in the classroom? As I said, could be part of materials. Could you think of some more inventive things to do? Have a think about that, because in a minute we can share a few things. One of the organizations I worked with, which was a sales training company for Pfizer, which is a big pharmaceutical company. I did some work with them in India. And I showed them QR codes one day, and the next day they used them in their training. And what they did was, that picture's a bit blurry, I'm sorry about that. It seems all right on my computer. They used them to create a treasure hunt, made it a bit more interesting. So they put some information up around the wall, and they embedded a QR code in it, and that was access to different resources. But that was just one simple little activity to generate some interest in the QR codes. And because it was novel, everybody was fairly excited about it. But, I mean, this could be part of your regular way of displaying things. I often get, when I'm talking about QR codes, I say to people, why don't you try and experiment? Put something on the wall with a QR code somewhere in your office or around the rooms, and let's see what people do with it, how people find it. And use QR codes in all your advertising materials and promotional materials and so forth, not just sort of text and links. So if you're interested to read about that, this is Sundar from India, who wrote, after I'd done some work with his group, wrote a blog post about it, how to use them to create an immersive mobile learning experience in the classroom. Remember, we're still talking about the classroom here. If you want to read that, well, I've posted it onto a whiteboard here, or blackboard, or what we call a Padlet, actually, a Padlet, where this is another collaborative tool that can be used in the classroom. And if you want to look at that, go straight there. You can either type in that long code, a long URL to find it, or you can just put your QR reader up and have a look at that. Because that is a way of allowing people to collaborate. So the question is, how can QR codes be used in the classroom? If you've got a tablet or a smartphone, access that Padlet and then just click on anywhere on the screen, and you can start to add something. So anyone like to have a go at that? We'll go to the site in a minute and see if we can get some activity going there. I'll wait for people to take a picture of it first. You got there? Too small? Come closer then. Oh, well, let me make it bigger for you then. Let me make it bigger for you. It's disappeared now. There it is. Is that too blurry now? Okay, good. Right, so what we've got there then is this Padlet. Here's the real life one. Okay, so if anyone wants to interact and put some suggestions on it, what you do is just click on it like that, and it'll add a box here, and you can type in anything you like. You can add voice, you can add an attachment, a picture or a link. And you see what I've done here is I put in this link to that article I told you about. Sundar's talking about QR codes. And if you just click on that, it would actually take you to the link itself. Oh, here we got one. Oh, there's me. Thank you. So you can have this coming as a stream through the classroom, or you can have it as a grid, which is what I set it up for. So you should see things. Now, this is private. You can make sure only the people with the URL know it, or only invited people. You can make it public, whatever you like. So if you're worried about security, you can actually close it down to a private session. So you can even moderate everything that's coming through, which means that you don't actually have to, if you're frightened, something might post something a bit odd, and I'm hoping you won't, that you can check before anything gets on it. We got any more down there? Anybody else going to put something up? So QR codes are quite a versatile way for doing something really, really simple, which is giving a link. Okay. You're working, and that's fine. I might have to go a bit quick because I've only got a set amount of time. Oh, somebody's put there. Is that somebody's QR code? Okay. So what we need to do then is get our QR code readers out and find out where that's going to go. I'll leave you to do that. So I see people still doing things, so I'm not going to move on until quite yet. So this thing, I've shown you two things now, QR codes and this Padlet board, which is a great way of just having a place where you can share, get people to share things. And as I said, it could be a class situation where everybody shares it, or it could be just a group thing for people to share their work or work together. This is just one of the many, many tools that people are using, and I've just picked this one because it's quite easy to set up. You just go to padlet.com and create your board straight away. I'll come back to that in a minute then. So is somebody doing anything would like me to wait? Wait. Okay, wait a second. Okay, wait a second. There we go. Oh, another one. That's good. Now we'll keep that board open, so you can come back to it after this session. You can come back and have a look at it, and you can add things to it if you want to. And we'll see what they go. It'd be quite useful if you put something around it. I mean, you were just sharing this code here, but maybe in the real world, you'd want to put where this is going to so people are aware, because people know probably a bit reluctant to go somewhere without knowing exactly where it's going to take them to. Okay, let me move on now then, because I'm conscious of time. The other thing that we can do that's become very popular in the classroom is just basic quizzing, polling, and feedback. Now, there are tools in many systems, built-in systems, but the ones that are taken off in education are things called Kahoot and Socrative. And these are more educational-based things. They're round about quizzes and educational materials and things. The other two are more sort of general purpose quizzing tools. And I tend to use Poll Everywhere. So what I've done is set up a poll for us to try out. So what you're going to do with this one, if you've got your mobile phones, is you want to answer this question. In 1995, 1% of the global population had a smartphone. What percentage did it grow to in 2014? So if you think it was 31%, then you need to remember that A there. So what you can either do, you can either go to pollev.com/C4LPT. Sorry, no QR code for this. Or you can text that number. I don't know where that number is. Is that in Spain? I don't know. Is that a Spanish number? That's the number they gave me for Spain. I don't know where it is. Is it a Spanish number? Does it sound like a Spanish number? Anyway, that's the number they gave me. So you can either go to pollev.com and do that, and then you need to put in the number, the letter that you think. Now that's just a snapshot, so I'm not going to go and find the real poll now, and we can see the results coming in live. Okay, has anyone done it yet? I hope it's live. Have you done it? Okay, so I'm hoping, because if it's live, we should see the numbers coming up. Oh, here we go. There we go. Oh. Just one or two can make a big difference. Okay. I think it's stopped now. Well, the actual answer was C, 73%. That was 2014, so maybe in the last few years it will have gone up to 94%. But that's the global population, smartphones. You know, in the US and in Europe, it's probably much higher than that. So that's globally. So everybody has a phone. I think, as I said earlier, it's about making use of it, isn't it? In as much as we do. So if you weren't convinced about the numbers, that's what the Internet Trends report said last year. So let's go back to the presentation then. So, whoops, I think we've got to escape out of that first. So that was just very simple polling, you know, and that helps to keep people awake if you're talking to them, or certainly if you're trying to get more collaborative. So that's really, really simple collaboration tools. Other things people are using are a back channel, that they have a completely separate approach where people can have a conversation ongoing aside the classroom activities. Those of you on Twitter are probably part of a back channel talking about what's happened this morning. This was me in again, not terribly good photo. This was me that's me there in the middle there. This was a session where people were having groups sessions, but we also had, and you can see on that screen over there, we also had a back channel where the outside world were taking part. So that was a Twitter back channel going on in this particular case. But that's just something that could happen in a classroom. You could have your activities going on in normal face-to-face mode, but you could have perhaps people from outside who couldn't be part of it as part in the back channel, or you could just close it down to being a back channel for the room. But people could ask the questions they have as part of the normal activity. So back channels are a useful tool, and if you've been used to them in say, conferences, a Twitter back channel, then you know how valuable they can be to having those side conversations, because often a lot of the really good stuff comes out in the back channel, doesn't it? Not just from the sort of broadcasty stuff. And I could talk a lot more about back channels, but I will move on quickly. The next thing I just wanted to say briefly, we're talking about mobile phones again, that one of the things I'm seeing is the use of WhatsApp quite a lot in education and training. A lot of people have WhatsApp, don't they, on their phones now? I don't know if you do, and they're creating groups. And they're so easy for them to create groups for their own learning. So they're creating groups now, not on Facebook, but on their WhatsApp. And if you haven't seen what that looks like, it's just very simple to create a group. And I often do that in certain situations, just create a little group. And it might just last for the time of the class or the event. It doesn't have to go on forever. People don't have to converse forever. But sometimes they then see the power of working together in these group situations, that they take it to the next stage. So all these tools, I mean, not saying you have to use everything, but there's just so much potential now. And I think if you just look around at what people are doing for themselves and take those ideas and bring them into the classroom, it really can make people feel more used to the technology, because they're doing this stuff so much for themselves outside. And remember, you haven't got to be the experts. If you want to use these tools, get your students to show you how they're using them, and you can try and integrate into their lives rather than forcing them to integrate into your life. So see, time's pressing on. I want to just talk a bit about content, because I talked briefly about some very simple tools for the classroom. As I said, the classroom then becomes a collaborative event, activities, brainstorming, discussions, and so forth, perhaps using technology. And you move the content out of that. So what does that content look like? How can we modernize that? Bearing in mind, I said that traditional press next type e-learning is not so popular nowadays. But before you do that, I just want to answer you another question. What do you think is the average viewer's attention span on YouTube? Okay, I'm going to put that one on the screen, but once again, you need to go to that poll, but once I've activated it, so I need to go to the next one. And activate it before it will work. Okay, you should be able to get access to that now. So do you think it's 63 seconds, 93 seconds, or 102 seconds, 123 seconds? So is it just over a minute and a half, or 2 minutes? This is YouTube's reported statistics, okay? How long people are spending on average on a piece of content. I don't know how many results come in, but majority have got the right answer there, look. It's just under a minute. As I said earlier, people's attention spans are dropping quite considerably. They want to get that on to the next thing. They're not interested in spending hours doing something. Okay, I'm going to leave that one for a minute. You can find out these polls later. Let me just go back to here. So the point is then, what people are responding by this, and they're turning things into shorter pieces of content. And in the classroom, it's about small, active, and frequent snippets of content or learning activity rather than big sit-down monologues. So ideally, I wouldn't really be talking to you for like 60 minutes. We'd cut this up into like smaller pieces, maybe not quite 60 seconds perhaps, but certainly short pieces. And we bundle them up and make them available. And you can look at them in your own time. You haven't got to think, oh, I've got 60 minutes of stuff to look at. We look at small pieces. Now, when I talk to people in education, they say, oh, but in education you have to focus and you have to sit down and do things for a long time. We can't deal with that. But we have to deal with the realities of the world that people's attention spans are dropping. That doesn't mean to say that we have to cram our whole course into 2 minutes. It means we have to sort of segment it into smaller bits and create a whole bundle of stuff, of smaller chunks of pieces of content that people can look at on their phones when they have time, rather than necessarily sitting down and doing it as an activity. We found that more people will access stuff perhaps on the bus or on the train, short pieces, rather than sitting down to do a focused piece of activity. And if you give it to them in the way that they're using it, then they're much more likely to respond to it. So the next thing is that it's also becoming very visual, as I said, this content. And what has really shot up the list in terms of authoring tools for content are things like animated explainers, Powtoon, I don't know if you've heard of these, and Video Scribe, things like that, which allow you to create small pieces of animation. They've become very popular. So I've got a little bit of example to show you. I don't know if the sound's going to work. We'll see. But this is
learning for the first 18 years of your life that the Earth is flat. All through elementary school and high school, you grow up hearing about the flat Earth we live on and doing boring flat Earth physics homework, and then, if you're lucky enough, you get to college and, psych, for the first time they show you a globe and say, sorry for lying, the Earth is actually round. Well, this is, unfortunately, exactly what we do with... You probably learned that objects attract each other based on their mass, so you probably grew up thinking that light can't possibly be affected by...
I'm going to turn the sound off there. Leave it playing in the background. The point is about this was 2-minute physics. Now, if anybody teaches physics, I don't know, you think, how can you teach physics in 2 minutes? But this is 2 minutes about gravity, 2 minutes about something else. You can condense it down, and you can make it more visual. And these kind of things, if you're familiar with Khan Academy, for instance, which is very animation type activities, these are the tools that allow you to do this. Okay, it might take a little bit of time to invest in it, but a lot of them come with templates that are already set up that you can just drop your content in until you get proficient with them. But this is certainly becoming very popular in education at all levels, small kids through to adult and higher adult education. So that was just 2 minutes about a bit of physics, and it actually shows you how to grow these animated cartoons and so forth. So content like that can be much more in the same sort of way as though people would perhaps find online for themselves. And now we have the tools to do it, whereas before we had to send it off to some content developer to create. Now we actually have the tools to do it on the desk, and some of them are actually free or the free versions of them. So again, it's not an arm and a leg as we say in England, not enough. It doesn't cost a lot of money to buy these things. And if you are very much into PowerPoint, and I don't know if you've seen this new plugin called Office Mix for PowerPoint. If you're a PowerPoint fanatic, you can create animation and video and put it on along a timeline using this free plugin called Office Mix. And that came onto the top 100 tools list with a bang last year, up into about 50 places or something like that. It's such an easy tool to add to your Microsoft. And you can turn your static slide-based presentation into an animated timeline. So if you haven't found that one out, check it out. There's a great example. This is Bill Gates talking about poverty here, but it just shows you how you can create a much more animated presentation than perhaps you would normally do. And of course, the important thing is it needs to be responsive. This stuff needs to be able to be seen on any device. We can't be sure where people are going to look at it. And so most content nowadays will respond to the device. It will turn into the device. It will be viewable on the device. So it's not something we have to really think through anymore. But just be aware that we don't know what device people are going to look at this stuff on. They're not necessarily going to see it on a web page, as a web page on a computer. It could be on anything. And we can also make it more interactive. The great thing about things like tablets is that we can have interactive books. And once again, with Mac, if you're a Mac user, there's free stuff to creating iBooks where you can move things around. So if you're interested in creating documents like that, or even interactive worksheets where you fill in, worksheets directly on the iPad. And if you want to bring interactivity into the classroom, there's another way to do that. Or you can just provide it outside of the classroom. And there's a widget, there's an app called Book Widgets, which allows you to create these interactive worksheets using all kinds of different types of widgets to do that, games as well as perhaps sort of just questions and so forth. So it doesn't have to be just content, pushing content out. It could be more interaction for people to do outside as well. And these kind of tools, again, are being used, I'd say, through the whole range of education, from down in the school, classroom, right up into higher education. And then, of course, finally, there's the apps. Well, you've got the mobile app now for Moodle. That was going to probably be just one of your many apps that people have on their smartphones, alongside those to learn languages and all kinds of things. So education and learning is becoming mobile. It's becoming much more interactive, social, all these things. I think the future for any organization is thinking the big picture. But if you haven't been used to this, just trying some small things. Hopefully I've inspired you to think about at least one new thing today that you could perhaps go away and try. The last thing I need to just mention before we finish is more social experiences. Now, when we come to an online social experience, excuse me, I think we have to be very careful here. Social learning has become a buzzword, but social learning for me is when people just learn for themselves much more autonomously. When we do it in an online educational situation, I think we have to be very careful because we can confuse compliance, people doing things, being social because they have to be, with engagement, which is people wanting to engage with one another, wanting to be social with one another. So my recommendation is if you do have an online social, don't you force people to be social, you just encourage them to be social. There will be some people who don't want to interact, and you can't force them to do that. See, I haven't made you all interact here because I know some people don't feel comfortable to do it. So people learn as much from watching others interact and be social as much as from doing it themselves. So we have to be aware of that. So if you go social online, make sure it's not making people have to do things, because all that you get is just compliance, not any real engagement happening. So that's just my sort of words of wisdom here. All kinds of tools for that. You've got Moodle, but other people are using other things. I use actually Yammer, which is a social platform for the workshops that I run. And for me, it's about replicating that social experience I have on Facebook or Twitter, which is this constant stream of information. So it's not siloed into discussions and content and so forth. But social has a very, very broad meaning. So it's not just about making people talk to one another in the classroom or online. It's about helping them to come together and learn from one another whatever ways. So I'm drawing to an end now. Just one more question for you. I'd like to know if you could provide some ideas about what you're doing that you think is really changing the way your classroom or online experiences are happening. So let's go back to my poll here and get that one running. I think that one should be active though. That one hides it. Well, we need to get that up screen. So there's nothing there. So this one is, before you had A, B, C to answer. This is free text. If you type something in there, it should appear in a grid on the screen, I'm hoping. Anyone like to just give me an example of something they're doing which they think is modernizing the classroom or the online experience for themselves? This is where we wait to make sure the technology works. It worked before. Have you done something? Anyone done anything? And it should be appearing? Maybe we need to wait for a bit of more. So I showed you Padlet. We could be using Padlet for that. There are all kinds of tools. I'm just using poll everywhere. Here comes something. There we go. So this is another way you could use poll everywhere as a back channel or for interaction and collaboration. Oh, that's good. Twitter during the lessons. That's a good one to hear, that one. Who was that from, Jill? Oh, everything online. Okay, well, I think I'll stop there. Hopefully I've got you thinking. Some more ideas coming through here. And this is what I think it's about, isn't it? Sharing what people are doing, teachers are doing all around the university. Get inspiration from one another and helping people to see the potential where perhaps, you need someone just to trigger it off. They say it shouldn't be technology-led, but if you understand the technology or get a view on the technology, then you can start to see things that you wouldn't before. So innovation comes from sometimes understanding what the technology can do for you. So thank you very much. If anyone wants to ask any questions, I'm happy to answer more. I'll be around for